Hi, I'm Gage Clary with the Texas Tech English Department, and I'm doing my podcast over how AI is shaping our future. And this is my friend Skylar.
Hi, I'm Skylar. I've have experience with robotics at the high school level, and then just also as a hobby for the past couple of years. And I've worked with AI specifically in reference to planned motion, so doing specific things in specific ways at specific times, and vision processing.
And then Anthony, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, said Anthony. I used to work with the Roborators and founded the robotics team at All Saints, and I'm a currently cadet at the United States Air Force Academy, hoping to go either into remotely piloted drones or bomber combat systems officer.
Very cool, very cool. So my first question for y'all is: do you think the COVID pandemic has changed the ideology of AI taking over jobs? I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think in a few ways it's kind of redefined a lot of people how the way they look at jobs. It re-emphasized how crucial certain jobs like grocery store workers and fast food workers are, and obviously they were put a lot more at risk in this pandemic than they usually are.
Right.
So that kind of makes me think that the general populace would be more um, leaning towards automating those fields, and as they certainly could be with AI.
Okay, okay. Do you think it'll affect like lower or middle class workers more?
Generally, what we see with the industrialization of jobs is it affects the lower fields specifically
Mm.
first,
Yeah.
but it sort of pushes people towards higher skill jobs, which obviously pay more. But there will probably be a period of time where it does negatively affect the lower income.
Okay, so I've done a bit of research and I found that it will actually create more jobs than take away. But I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think it will, or because I mean, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
how so?
I mean, yeah, you saw that with the industrial revolution in every country that it occurred in.
Yeah.
Um, it sort of just like pushes the floor up for job skill.
Hmm.
That's why over the past couple decades you've seen the need for college increase with jobs, just because of automation and sort of the removal of like the basic jobs like assembly line workers. Um, so yeah, I think it will create more jobs than it destroys eventually, but there will
Yeah,
probably be a
yeah.
period of like a
It'll
half
definitely
a
take a
decade.
long time.
Yeah, yeah.
Anthony, you have anything to add?
Um, Not a whole lot, just the fact of it. I do agree that will create more jobs.
Mm.
However, the jobs they require a higher skill cap. So manual labor jobs that were done by lower middle class that have much of education will not likely be able to integrate into this new career field that have been invented. They'd be more for the upper middle class to actually afford to go to college or choose to go to college.
Okay. So will those lower and middle class workers like have to work their way to a higher like? Will it take like generations for them to become like to achieve like a better job? Does that make sense?
Yes, I wouldn't say it would take generations, but rather it would push the lower middle class to find a way to get that education rather than just settling for a low class job.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it would take a refining of the educations, and it would
Yeah.
just be a question of how quickly we can do that, because we
Yeah.
have to sort of we have been, but we need to shift more aggressively away from
Mm.
the trade school um, and those things that can be automated to the more higher skill gap jobs.
Gotcha. Okay, so like I know like McDonald's especially like that's one of the places that I've noticed has like taken over jobs with AI. I mean just with like the menu like whatever you order yourself right there and you don't even speak to a cashier. Do you think it'll progressively get worse with taking over jobs in the next few years?
So the distinction there is those menus they don't like handle any sort of like they don't have error catching basically, because the same thing happens every time, and there is never an instance to where they have to react to any different circumstances.
Gotcha.
Whereas if you want to take over like I don't know, plumbing, jobs and stuff like that.
Mm.
The robots have to be able to adapt to new situations. So I think because of that, it'll probably take I would guess around a decade for those jobs to start taking over, because you have to have a lot of sample data for those things. But I
Okay.
think we're definitely headed in that direction. Yeah.
So, do you know much about deep learning? I mean, it's
Kind of.
okay. Like AI, like
Fair bit.
learn by doing things.
Hmm.
I mean, do you think that'll be like developed into the software like pretty
Uh,
soon?
yeah, I'd say that's probably would be the best way of accomplishing most of these jobs
Mm.
is because you can also because once you get that, because it's not like every robot needs to do that.
Oh,
You can have
yeah,
one robot do that, and then you just sort of copy pasta.
because it's definitely
So
more intricate than just having a menu have that kind of learning. It's kind of, I don't know. You don't really need that.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Um. So given that the like as they take jobs, how do you think the government will respond? Because people will be more in need of a financial assistance. Does that make sense? So as they take jobs, people are going to be out of jobs, so they're going to have to lean towards the government for that.
Anthony, you want to go first on this one?
Um, that's a very tough question,
Yeah.
given that whichever direction the government's leading has very different reactions towards towards that.
Mhm.
If I had to guess, it would probably wind up um, raising the annual income for what's considered for the poverty cap, so they actually poverty caps that actually qualify for things like food stamps if they need them, as well as larger government subsidies. But again, this is guess. We can't really predict how the government would react to that at the moment,
Yeah.
just because that's a very case by case basis.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think yeah, and sort of on a different point, I would argue that education, since it's government, I think that has to shift very. The government will need to shift that fairly dramatically. Um, and also the whole what is it? What's it called? The college tuition crisis or whatever
Oh
it's
yeah,
called.
yeah, yeah.
That would need to be adequately handled in whatever way that it decides to be handled. Um, by because when you eliminate sort of the trade jobs, and people need that level of higher education that you can only get at college. So
Okay.
that's what
Um,
I think.
I don't have this written down, but like, do you think AI will eventually get to the point where it can do like higher skill jobs? Like, this is a stretch, but like doing like surgery or medical things. Because I mean, it's definitely far from it, but I know that there's a lot of medical centers that use like technology and rely on technology for that. Like, do you think it'll ever become to the point where it'll take over that job?
I would I would most definitely think so. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I don't think we're actually as far away from it as most people would think, because there's a lot of instances of like I don't know the fact. So there's like OpenAI was able to beat human players in Dota, which is a massive FPS game, and that has a lot more variables involved than surgery does. I think the harder thing there is going to get people to trust the AI more than
Yeah.
actually get the AI to be competent.
Yeah, so like I know like some of the newer cars, they create a virtual world for themselves and they have all their sensors like process the data and put it into their own little world. And if a car like gets in a wreck, then it all that memory that it had like of preventing whatever like the car crash to happen again is spread through all of those every car automatically. So like this becomes philosophical in a way. Do you think as surgeries like as surgeries happen, do you think the AI will learn to like progress in like knowing right from wrong and like I don't know, cuz like there's always like the life and death situation in in that, you know. So do you think it'll eventually know?
Yeah, I mean for sure, because that's just a network of AIs
Yeah.
basically. Um, and that's a really cool thing about it, because and when you have, because that just creates like this massive database and collection of what went wrong in all these surgeries. And if you have AI, and if you have a way to collect that much data, and AI is able to look at that, and it will be able to see things that humans can't, patterns that led to unwanted consequences.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that that's for sure a very big advantage of AI.
Mm.
Um, Kind of a little bit of a counter to that is that it requires to learn. It requires the AI to make mistakes,
Mm.
and there are certain operations that are considered high, or what I would consider high risk operations, where something abnormal happens and the patient dies, where a robot is just following its programming or following the AI's programming, versus where humans would have been able to see what was going on, that something was off. If that makes sense at all.
Yeah.
So there's definite risk with that with AI.
Yeah, it would have to be a fairly, but one that could exist within the next decade as well. I'd say.
Within the next decade, really?
Yeah, just it's exponentially getting just more and more crazy, honestly. So
Hmm. Okay.
that's my source.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Okay. Do y'all have anything else to add? Any knowledge you would like to share? No?
Um, All good thing about that is that I know that AI is being or starting being applied towards military purposes for little drones called Perdix drones. They're about
Mm.
maybe a big, designed to fly in um, not restricted airspace, but airspaces that are controlled and protected where our aircraft can't normally fly, and hopefully subdues the wrong word, but deal with air defenses.
Mm.
But uh,
Yes.
Congress is not exactly a fan of it because they are a hive mind. They swarm. They
The
communicate with one
drones
another,
are
but
not Congress.
they're not Congress. But like, they don't have a distinct flight plan like any aircraft will. They have a
Okay.
general space where they're going to be. So a lot of modern day applications of AI will require new or changes in policies from Congress in regards to the military standpoint, at least.
Huh.
Yeah, because they can't be precisely controlled. It's just like go. It's
Okay.
very cool.
So what's their objective? Do you know? Like,
Um, there's a multitude of objectives for them. Last I read, it was to deploy into an environment where there's a lot of anti-aircraft weapons, radar, things like
oh,
that, things where you wouldn't want to send an aircraft in, and have them. I'm not sure what the entirely goal was, active as a distraction or subdue them practically. They didn't go into too much detail about that, but the fact they could be used in that application to where they can help deal with enemy airspace and then send in our aircraft,
Yeah,
mm,
I would imagine sensor jamming in some way
most
okay.
likely.
would be what I would imagine.
Hmm. Okay, so I watched a recent movie. Sorry. Like, do you think the AI will like be able to be hacked pretty easily?
Interesting question.
Like,
That is my area of specialty. But what movie?
it's called Lo and Behold.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's the one you were telling me about.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to tell, honestly, because obviously, if an AI gets hacked, if it recovers, which is questionable, it
Mm.
will learn from that, defend itself better. Because I don't think AI will be entirely aware that cybersecurity is something that needs to be dealt with until it is hacked, or unless it is explicitly told that cybersecurity is something that it needs to be aware of. So that's
Hmm.
a really interesting thing. Where, like, if IBM releases this big AI one day, if they don't explicitly tell the AI, hey, cybersecurity, then it's just like any regular defended application that can be hacked. And then if you can like break AI out of its box, that can get very messy very quickly. So yeah, and if and the other thing is, if you were to hack AI with some infected with some sort of malware, the system it's on, then the AI could perhaps even learn what that malware is and like the basic functions that it uses in order to spread itself to other machines and kind of like it's I forget what they call it, but it basically like meshes with the Trojan, and so it just kind of spreads. It piggybacks off the virus and spreads to other networks and other things like that. So if
Okay.
you get another, yeah, it's cool.
Okay, so I don't know how firewalls work, but like, okay, knowing that like they learn from each other, could it like build itself a firewall, like strengthen like its protection? Does that make sense?
Yeah, most definitely. So a firewall is basically just what are you allowing into the network,
Mhm.
um, like what ports are open, and so like it depends on what you want to do on a computer. Um, but if an AIs could basically look at all your network logging information and say, okay, we have a lot of information coming through on these ports from these addresses, and we absolutely need that information, so we'll keep that open. But these ports that are open don't have any information coming through, so we can just go ahead and block those. Um,
Gotcha.
and yeah, so it can make very powerful firewalls just because of its ability to filter through a, a ton of network information very quickly.
Huh.
So, but
Interesting.
like I said, it has to be told to do that and told that that is something it needs to look at.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Okay. Hmm. So could you like I don't know if you can, but can you write that in code? Like, could you
I
tell?
can't.
I mean, is that a possibility? Could you like tell it to?
Actually, probably could. I wouldn't imagine that would be that difficult. Actually, now I'm looking at it because you'd basically just it'd be a threat analysis like anything else. It'd basically just be a pen tester's job, where it's just, you just go look and you analyze. You're like, okay, so what benefit does this port being open have? How much how vulnerable is every system on the network because that port is open, and how much benefit does it provide? So it's just like this cost analysis thing. Um, and that's what pen testers do for a job. And so AI can do that better. And I don't think that would be incredibly difficult for actually now that I think about it. You
Hmm.
just have to like customize it to whatever your enterprise
Okay.
wants. So
Okay. So my final question. Do you think AI will overall benefit humanity or be detrimental to humanity?
you go first, military man.
That is a very, very tough question, and that the answer to that question depends on who you are.
Mm,
Um, if you're applying it in the military aspect, it's probably going to being beneficial, say for the US, it'd be beneficial for us, but absolutely horrible for enemies. Versus, say, in a practical application, useful for almost the entire population, but should it get hacked, should something happen to it, you might have unleashed probably one of the greatest viruses the world has ever seen or will see. It's kind of my standpoint, at least.
okay.
Yeah, because like yeah, I agree with that. I would say it'd probably be positive, especially if we can figure out a way to interface it with humans in a good way,
Yeah.
like what Neuralink's working on.
Hmm.
If we can figure some shit like that out, then it's definitely good for you.
Yeah.
If it just ends up, if we can coexist like that, that's great. If it's just AIs and humans existing in sort of these different realms almost, um, then that could get rather messy rather quickly. Because it's like there's this analogy. I think Elon Musk said it that I like a lot, and it's basically like when we as humans go to make a road, like we may roll over an anthill, but we don't do it with malintent. We just do it because they're in the way of progress,
Hmm.
and AI could easily do something like that. So we just kind of gotta watch out for that a little bit. But at the same time, if it gets to that point, I don't really know how we stop it. So
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it'll be positive overall for sure.
yeah.
I don't think it'll ever like take over. Do you?
Hard to say. It's seen a lot of. I'm more I'm more optimistic about it not taking over than I was a year ago. I'll admit that.
Yeah.
Um, but because I don't know, the research that's coming out is a bit more promising than it was.
I feel like people have more control over AI than they think. Like they always like I always saw the videos of like them like talking back or something.
Yeah, but it's also like AI can live through a million lives in like 10
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
it's if there is any opportunity for them to escape, if that's the word you want to use, um, they will find it. And so I don't know. Just got to be careful with that sort of thing. And that's not something that's easily regulated. So
Hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for your information. It was really interesting. I like that. It was a good discussion. All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us as well as Skylar. Both very good. All right. Yeah.